glad to welcome you all and start the fifth event of this webinar series in dialogue with the Regional Forum for Research and Innovation. After 1 month already, we are approaching fast the end of this journey, which has been conceived to introduce the 10 international members of the Forum, which is the Lombardy Region Advisory Board for the responsible governance of research and innovation, and to present to the Lombardy society at large. And I know that in particular today we have attendees well beyond the borders of Lombardy to present Forum's activities in these last 3 years. As I said, we are very close to the end with our fifth event after a very rich list of interesting topics in the broader realm of science, innovation, and society relationship. Especially for those who are not so familiar with the Forum was established thanks to a regional law, the Regional Law Lombardy is Research and Innovation in 2016, and its role is to support the regional government in the responsible governance of research and innovation at local level. To achieve this objective, 10 members have been selected thanks to an international open call. And at the end of this selection process, 10 experts in responsible research and innovation, social innovation, data ethics, data governance, technology assessment and public engagement, science, technology and innovation policies have been appointed. And because of this richness of competencies and experiences, in the past webinars, we have explored first, methods and approaches to engage citizens in co-designing public policies in research and innovation, as well as ways to involve citizens in the processes of research and innovation, together with Marzia Mazzonetto and Agnes Alansdottir. We have also known more about the importance of the usage of big data for better public policies, but we have also dived into big data limits and some relevant emerging issues, perhaps not already taken deeply into account, like the impact of big data on the massive energy consumption and their effect on the environmental sustainability, thanks to Federica Lucivero and Francesco Lescai. We have then learned how a missing gender balance in research and innovation can have also an economic cost for our societies. And we have discovered what institutions and governments across the world are doing to close this gap with a webinar of Denise Didio and Guido Romeo. And just 1 week ago, David Gaston has introduced the US-based initiative called Public Interest Technology to better keep future technologists and policymakers to design, produce, and regulate just technological innovations. Today, we will go across one of the most mentioned keywords nowadays in science, technology, and innovation policies, the missions. The missions are definitely gaining momentum in the European context. This is one of the big novelty of the current framework program to support research and innovation at European level. But we also have missions in our national realm. In the grounding of the Next Generation EU in Italy plan, we have also missions. Missions have been proposed as specific societal challenges with a more articulated and measurable objectives, as well as clearly defined time horizon. Missions promise to shape the research and innovation landscape towards addressing grand challenges. In this webinar, our 2 speakers of today, Douglas Robinson and Ralf Lindner, will provide you an introduction to mission-oriented policies and also practices, describe some requirements for mobilizing mission as a policy approach, and offer some practical consideration and food for thought especially for regional policymakers and research and innovation stakeholders. Just a brief introduction before leaving the floor to our two speakers. A brief introduction of the profiles of the two speakers of today. Douglas Robinson is Deputy Director of LISIS, the Laboratory for Interdisciplinary Studies of Science, Innovation and Society. Since 2017, Douglas Robinson has been a senior researcher at CNRS in France and a honorary senior research associate at the Institute of Innovation for Public Purpose at University College London, working with Professor Mariana Mazzucato on mission-oriented innovation policies and its implementation. Originally trained as physicist and space scientist, Douglas has been both researcher and consultant, focusing on the emergence of breakthrough technologies and their transformation into working technology in society. A large part of his work is connecting academic research with real-world problems through engagement exercises, operationalizing responsible research and innovation, multi-stakeholder technology assessment, and the development of policy-relevant intelligence, also producing reports for the OECD and European Space Agency and the NASA. Ralf Lindner is head of the Department Policy and Society and coordinator for technology assessment and governance at the Fraunhofer Institute for Systems and Innovation Research. He has participated in managed and coordinated numerous large national and European research projects in the field of science, technology, and innovation policy and governance. He is particularly interested in policy design and governance approaches for transformative changes, mission-oriented innovation policy, responsible research and innovation, and processes of policy learning. Ralf Lindner received his degree in political science and economics from the University of Augsburg, completed graduate work at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, and postgraduate studies at Carleton University in Ottawa. From 2011 to 2013, Ralf Lindner held a chair in political science at Quadriga University Berlin, where he also was head of the Department of Politics and Public Affairs. So good morning, Douglas Robinson and Ralf Lindner. Welcome, and now the stage is yours.
Great.
Thank you, Angela. So I'll upload the slides. Because I'll be clicking through the slides on behalf of Ralf and myself, I will not see your faces. I apologize. But please scream out if you need me to stop. So thank you, everybody. So our talk today is mission-oriented innovation policy, approach requirements and practical considerations. So Ralf and I will make a tag team through this presentation. This is the first time we've presented together and integrated our thoughts. We have a lot of synergies and complementary experiences which we'd like to share with you. Of course, what we'll do today is a tip of the iceberg. We'll give a kind of review of certain elements and await your questions. So a little bit about us. Ralf, would you care to introduce yourself a little bit more about your experiences with missions?
Yes, thank you very much. And also thanks for having us here. It's great to have the opportunity to present our thoughts on missions and discuss particularly these issues with you guys. Thank you also, Angela, for facilitating this event. Extremely helpful. Just brief words why we are talking about missions today and what we are basically bringing to the table. At Fraunhofer ISI, I've been focusing at least for the last 10 years, I would say, on issues of directionality in research and innovation policy. This is something that kind of emerged over the last few years, which is all about trying to reorganize research and innovation systems in such a way that they are better capable of addressing pressing societal needs. And mission orientation, of course, is part of this bigger picture. And in more concrete terms, we are at the Institute are currently conducting scientific support activity on behalf of the German Federal Ministry for Research and Education, which is all about looking into the German high-tech strategy. And the German high-tech strategy is kind of the umbrella strategy of the federal government on research and innovation. And the current version of this strategy defined 12 different missions. And we are tasked with this project on looking on how the implementation is actually progressing, and also tasked with the challenge, I would say, to develop a concept for measuring the impact of these missions. I'll leave it there and hand over back to Doug.
Yes, so I'm here for a number of reasons. I've been working with mission-oriented policy from two directions. One, with Marianne Mazzucato, we started our journey together in working on the space sector. So we were tasked by NASA to think about how to build a new space economy, an innovation ecosystem up there in orbit, which connected very well with regions within the United States of America and globally. And so NASA tasked us to come up with some big thinking, and we worked together on mission-oriented policies or strategies for NASA for building such an economic zone. And the European Space Agency liked this idea and asked us to repeat this idea, Mariana and myself, for the European Space Agency and the European Union. And there the focus was a little bit different. It was focusing on all sorts of things like navigation and telecoms, but also new types of space technologies. How can we build a mission-oriented research and innovation ecosystem that mobilizes space, but for the benefits of society and some concrete and specific goals? And so that was one angle I come to mission-oriented thinking. And Mariana and I continue this kind of endeavor in the space sector, thinking about missions and how it can be used. Another aspect links to my background in technology assessment and foresight. We are working in France, where I'm based, with a number of agencies to build capacities to think about missions and incorporate into both funding programs and research activities themselves. How do you build capacities? I will explain a little bit in a few of the slides I will present today, and perhaps if you have questions, we can go a little bit further. So I'll leave it there and hand over to Ralf. There you go.
Okay, great. Thank you, Doug. Yeah, just to kind of provide you with some orientation on what we will be talking about in the next, I would say, 30 minutes. The introductions are already made. In the first step, we will given our account of the understandings of mission orientation or mission-oriented innovation policy. Also, the terms are quite diverse that are being used out there. But this is kind of the first step to kind of present kind of the common understandings that we are observing on this issue. And the next step, based on kind of this background of what actually constitutes a mission, we will present our thoughts on what actually does this imply for policy making. Now, if you're a policymaker and you want to actually embark on such a mission, what are actually the implications of that for policy making, and what are the conditions you should keep in mind? And then at the end, we want to kind of sum up with some of the key takeaways we think might be useful, and present a couple of thoughts, food for thought. All right, thank you, Doug. Yes, and Angela already mentioned a couple of key points on the mission-oriented policy issues. What we indeed observe, and that's what Angela rightly said, is that mission orientation has become really a key element in many countries of the OECD world. We see it not only in the countries that are present here with Doug Doug in France and myself in Germany, but we see it in the UK, in the Netherlands, in Japan, and many other countries around the world. Despite this successful development of mission policy at this strategic level, we do have to take into account that the concept and its implementation is really still in the making. So it's still a very new concept in many ways, and we see still very different understandings that are being applied to the concept, and also different ways in which mission orientation manifests itself in actual policies in different countries. So this is just to keep in mind. There's no a firm understanding set in stone. Things are still in motion and developing quite dynamically, I would say. Maybe it is also important to keep in mind that on the one hand, it is quite obvious that missions are quite promising because they provide a chance to effectively address pressing societal problems, and I actually believe also particularly at the regional level. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the course of our presentation. So this is the one side, kind of the chances that are associated with mission orientation. But at the same time, we should be quite aware that implementing mission orientation is actually quite demanding, and requires a couple of changes in the way policies are actually developed and made, but also in the processes of implementing these policies. All right, so then I guess I can hand over back to Doug.
Okay, so the second part of our presentation is understanding mission-oriented innovation policy. So, I mean, you've all seen these, the kind of move towards integrating sustainable development goals and all sorts of sub-elements of those sustainable development goals into research and innovation policy and other policies around the world. This is, I mean, these are from 2015. They echo a kind of transformation of inclusion of these grand challenges over the last decade. And while we're here, it's kind of taken up in various ways across the world. And one element, especially in the European landscape, is to translate these sustainable development goals, which are very broad and very general, into more specific societal challenges. And so we're in the age of missions. This is a book a colleague of mine, Cayetano, has written with Mariana, but I'm going to use it as a free advertisement of this excellent book, but also I'll use this heading, the age of missions. We're in the age of missions, whether you like it or not. It's high on the policy agenda. So what does it mean? What is the age of missions? Well, missions are more than broad principles. They privilege impacts, specific impacts that are desired. They have a clear goal and they mobilize many different actors. We'll come to that in a moment. They're the translation of grand challenges like the Sustainable Development Goals into doable problems. So the idea is to be more specific, to create perhaps we could call them specific societal challenges that can be tackled and targeted. It's a key role for mission-oriented policy. So in the past, missions aren't new. There were missions before. Missions were often related to a well-defined outcome, such as putting a man on the moon, which mostly entailed technological challenges, and something I forgot to mention in the slide, often governed by a centralized actor. But modern missions, such as those addressing climate change, are more complex because there are fewer clear technological challenges and the outcomes are less clearly defined. So missions have to manage this uncertainty, but still try to achieve. So before moving on, I want to reflect a little bit on the integration of two elements in the Horizon Europe program. We mentioned it before. Missions are high on the agenda, but also ecosystems are high on the agenda. So I'd like to take a little sideline to look at ecosystems first and then move into missions. And you'll see the reason why we do this later on in the presentation. So Horizon Europe. So Horizon Europe is, well, it says the next, it's there now. It's the European Commission Framework Program for Research and Innovation, close to 90 billion euros on this program, so very large program indeed. And this came, part of the pathway to this Horizon Europe program was a reflection on the key findings from the last framework program, Horizon 2020. And Horizon 2020 had an interim evaluation to explore what are the achievements so far and what are the lessons we can already learn to shape the next framework program, Horizon Europe. And in particular, I'll start here. Strengthening international cooperation, reinforcing openness, rationalizing the funding landscape. These were elements that came up as trends for research and innovation policy and funding. And the key novelties for Horizon Europe that were envisaged then were extended association possibilities, open science policy, and most importantly for our presentation, new approach to partnerships. So let's take Carlos Moedas. 2015, he gave a presentation which echoed some of these things in the interim report and drove the pathway towards Horizon Europe. Of course, it's not just Carlos Moedas, but he is a clear spokesperson for the Horizon Europe program. So let's take this forward. So he said, we are entering a world of open, user-driven innovation, a world in which the digital and the physical converge. A world in which knowledge is created through global collaborations involving thousands of people from around the world and from all walks of life. And then all over the world, through the involvement of a wide range of publics, innovation is increasingly presented as a participatory process to which everyone can and should contribute. So this is brought into the very fabric of the Horizon Europe program. And the general idea that was brought up at these early stages was a notion called Open Innovation 2.0 and the quadruple helix idea. The quadruple helix was brought in the Horizon 2020 program. And let me explain what those are. So Open Innovation 2.0. So while open innovation, CESPRA, etc., focuses on the firm as a central actor and how to create value through opening up to other actors, Open Innovation 2.0 takes the quadruple helix, so government, society, academic research, business, and the different types of connections between those four helices. And the perspective of Open Innovation 2.0 is that useful knowledge and invention can be located in the different corners of that quadruple helix and as the outcome of collaborations between them. So the Open Innovation 2.0 as a policy aim requires experimenting with and understanding a diverse range of collaborative partnerships. So let's come back to the missions. So missions were envisaged as an idea in 2016. Mariana Mazzucato, my colleague from UCL, she was quite vociferous and quite visible and still is visible around notions of mission-oriented research and innovation, policies, and how to implement them. These are just two of the reports from a number of working groups that worked on the idea of mission-oriented research funding programs. And that general idea, which is translated into Horizon Europe today, translates, as I mentioned before, the Sustainable Development Goals as grand challenges to identify missions, and underneath these clear targeted missions, identify portfolio projects which are targeted at contributing, and this is a key word, contributing, not achieving on their own the mission aim. Come back to that a little bit later. So we have 5 mission areas that are guiding Horizon Europe. Many of you probably know all of these already. I just remind you of them. So soil, health, and food. These are mission areas. These are broader than missions themselves. Remember, missions have the idea of being concrete, specific challenges. And the Horizon Europe program has developed mission areas which within them would define concrete missions. So soil, health, and food is one broad area in which missions are being designed. Cancer, another one. Adaptation to climate change and including societal transformation is another. Climate neutral and smart cities, and healthy oceans, seas, coastal and inland waters. So many of these mission areas are very strongly linked to some of the priority areas for the region of Lombardy, as we've discovered in our time in the forum. So why did I take this distraction? Well, missions are not in a vacuum. They're connected to other policy approaches and ideas. And in Horizon Europe, we see, and the work that I do with Mariana and also in France, connect these two elements. This connection between the quadruple helix or innovation ecosystems, if you will, with mission areas. So this connection is important for regions like Lombardy, connecting mission thinking with regional ecosystems. And the region has an advantage on this, and we will discuss that later. So back to discussing missions and what they are. Already one can identify a broad range and diversity of missions. So Ralf, I'll hand over to you, and you tell me when you want me to speak.
Great, thanks for that, Doug. Yeah, Doug already alluded to the fact that indeed there's a broad range of the diversity to be observed out there in terms of different missions. And now in our current project in which we are tasked with the objective to develop a concept to measure the impact of mission policies, we started actually to try to get some order into this diversity, and started to develop a typology of different missions that we can empirically observe. And this chart here shows you kind of our fourfold typology. The four types are mapped on basically two main dimensions. We have on the one side, we can differentiate between missions that are mainly focusing on scientific or technological progress, or we see missions that have a bit of a broader ambition and actually trying to tackle things such as systemic change, wants to transform institutions and systems, socio-technical systems, and also include issues of trying to support behavioral change. So this is the one side, basically the goal orientation side of the missions, and on the other side, we do see significant differences in the different missions we are observing in terms of the demands for governance. So depending on the type of mission, we see quite significant differences in terms of what does this mean to organize, to implement, to steer, and to govern these missions. We started with basically the two main differences. We have the types of accelerator missions, which are mainly trying to speed up the development of a certain scientific or technological solution. And we have the transformer missions, which are more geared towards trying to achieve transformative change in different application areas. And we in each of these broad categories are display each two subtypes, because we even within the accelerator and the transformer types, we do see different approaches. For instance, if you look at the accelerator types, we have some of the missions are really quite narrow in terms of focusing on a certain technological or scientific breakthrough. And in terms of governance, this is still demanding, but compared to the others, it is not as complicated because you do not have involved so many different actor types. Then you have accelerator type 2 missions, which are much more about actually diffusion, bringing a certain technological solution into the markets, into application. And this already increases the demands for governance, because in many cases, you experience, you have to look at application areas that cut across different fields. And things become a bit more complicated already, of course, with the transformer type missions. Here we are looking at transformations of certain socio-technical systems. Think of certain parts of the mobility system. And here already the coordination challenge becomes quite severe, because this is not only about issues of supporting certain and scientific breakthroughs, but it's also about issues of regulating the access to these solutions and providing certain market frameworks in order for the things to work. I think the details are not decisive here for the purposes of our presentation here, but the important message is, I think, to keep in mind there are quite different ways to look at missions, and depending on what mission goal you have in mind, the mission itself will look quite differently. And we think for policymakers or someone thinking about how should I design a mission, this typology might be useful because it poses a couple of questions at the very beginning of such a process. What type of problem actually do you want to address with your mission policy? Is it more about market failure? Is it more a structural issue you want to tackle? Is it a systemic thing you want to work on? Another important question: what type of solution is needed to tackle these problems? Is it more technological, more scientific? Is it more something that requires regulatory actions? Is it about changing complete socio-technical systems? And depending on your answers to these questions, the way you will set up a mission will differ. All right, Doug. We can look at this one here. This is basically just to sum up the great job Doug already did in explaining what are missions actually, and what characteristics do missions have. Just to repeat that, because we think it is important, because it does show a difference to, let me put it this way, to science, technology, innovation policy making without mission orientation. First is of course this that the missions need to be ambitious and clearly formulated. So we need clear goals addressing a certain problem. These goals should not just be stated, but they should be quantified and measurable. And decisions need to be made about within which time frame these goals are to be achieved. So wishy-washy timelines like, in a decade from now, XYZ will be achieved, that does not constitute a mission. Then missions are usually cross-cutting in scope, where that means they reach beyond the established silos of governmental departments, and this makes things, no doubt, a bit more complicated than if you remain within the realm of your usual remit. And the focus of ambitious missions also reaches clearly beyond the realm of science, technology, and innovation policy, and includes certain sectoral activities and has to keep in mind certain regulatory activities, for instance, as well. Yeah, I'll leave it there, and we can move to the next slide, Doug. So I guess, you know, the issue of trying to understand what actually constitutes a mission and what are the characteristics of missions leads us to the next question. So what does all this mean for actually setting up a mission-oriented policy? And in order to make things a bit less complicated and maybe to deal with the complexity of mission orientation, we identified basically three main translation steps that seem to be important to set up successful mission oriented policy. The first step here we see is, of course, first about the actual formulation of the mission, the decision about which societal challenge are we actually tackling here. And it's also a decision about scope. So how narrow or how broad will such a mission be? And this first step, I would argue, is one of the most crucial ones in any mission policy, because if things do not turn out well here, it's very difficult to catch up with the mistakes that have been done in early phases of such a mission policy. The next step is about the mission design, and here it is very important to look at the actual instruments you want to include in your mission policy. This is not trivial at all, because as Doug already said, mission orientation does not start in a vacuum, because in actually every policy area we're looking at, there are already activities in place. There are already instruments being applied, and you have to take these things into account and think about what is part of my mission. Are there maybe some gaps in my range of instruments that are already being implemented, and how do these instruments relate to each other? So this is quite an important task to think about these things. And as in the first step, in the second step, the same is true. We need to involve the relevant stakeholders in these processes, because they carry both the information about what is the suitable mix of instruments, but they also are very important to provide us with the adequate understanding of the problems at hand. So the third step then again is actually rolling out all these decisions in terms of the mission design, and so the mission implementation is another important step, and it also includes all those things that I would call kind of the ongoing monitoring of these activities, just to be sure, where are we with our mission? Are we moving in the right direction? So this is also a very important element in the third translation step. Okay. Then, yes, in the course of preparing this presentation, Doug and I were thinking about, well, how can we kind of boil down the key implications that mission orientation might have for policymakers and policy making. And we came up with these 4 key challenges we see in this area. It's about strategy, it's about coordination, about ensuring reflexivity, and also thinking about what can we do in order to increase the legitimacy of these policies. And yes, I think I can now hand over back to Doug on that.
Okay, so challenge 1, strategy. Well, one of the key points when you're discussing missions is which future you're talking about and for whom. So what is a mission success, actually? Articulating a desirable future requires engagement and collective strategy making. So why? I mean, we saw some of these things like the accelerator type 1 and type 2, transformer 1 and 2. For different types of mission-oriented policies, the missions are clearer or less clear, and the stakes are less clear or more clear, and the stakeholders are less clear and more clear, depending on which mission-oriented policy. So it's clear that not only having the mission goal, but anticipating what mission success would actually be is needed. And so collective strategy making is desirable, because your utopia might be my dystopia. And to create this kind of collective understanding of what mission success would be is important. We come back to other aspects of this, like legitimacy, later. And of course, the mission success is in the future, and well, there are a variety of pathways. So one pathway or many pathways. A variety of pathways can be envisaged, and how to maintain multiple routes whilst aligning policies. I mean, in particular for transformer mission-oriented policies, how many pathways do you want to maintain to be able to achieve success? You still have to try to maintain a portfolio. So of course, there are many routes. They may converge or diverge. And so an element of this is necessary in the strategy behind mission-oriented policy. So collective strategy articulation is needed. So co-designing the mission. So co-designing the mission aim and what the problematic actually is. So I'm re-showing this quadruple helix. That's one approach, and innovation ecosystem is another. But looking at the different types of stakeholders that could be involved. So whether accelerator or transformative missions require collective strategy making, articulating desirable futures and identifying the capabilities required for achieving those mission goals. These are important to identify before you develop your mission-oriented policy. And such a process would need to be very inclusive and involve relevant stakeholders. We see some of this happening in Horizon Europe around the mission areas, to a greater and lesser extent, depending on which mission area you're focusing on. And it should draw on different sources of strategic intelligence. I'll come back to that later. But of course, identifying and enrolling appropriate stakeholders is a key challenge in itself. This isn't easy. We'll come back to that again later. So collective strategy articulation should include a stock-taking exercise in which existing policies are identified and relevant stakeholders are also identified. Clearly articulated goals should be defined. We argue collectively, depends again how collectively that is based on the type of mission, as we mentioned earlier. And these missions should be measurable and should have binding timeframes. That's the whole point and strength and difficulty of mission-oriented policies, is that they have to be measurable and they must have a binding timeframe. So the nature of missions will also most likely mean that the relative role of STI policy may be reduced, putting other policy domains and other policy instruments such as regulation in a more prominent position when you're dealing with mission-oriented research and innovation policy. This brings up challenges itself. So Ralf, would you like to take challenge 2?
Yes, happy to do so. Yes, I think previously it already became clear that one of the challenges in this whole mission orientation is actually a coordination challenge, because due to this cross-cutting nature of most missions, the conventional mechanisms of coordination across departments that most governments have established usually are not enough. Doug, you can take the next one, please.
Drink my water, sorry.
Yeah. And just already the next one, I would say.
This one?
And, yeah, perfect. Yeah, and so what we are observing that normally in most countries, this mission orientation starts actually in ministries dealing with research policy and innovation policy in most cases. But once a very ambitious mission is actually being started, it becomes quite obvious that you have to actively coordinate and collaborate with the sectoral ministries. And now, in most countries, we know this is actually quite a challenge and not easy to do, because governmental departments tend to work in silos, tend to have a certain degree of competition, and so this needs to be actually addressed and dealt with in successful mission policy. Now, we don't know what the situation is within the regional government of the Lombardy region, but what we can say, at least from other subnational governments, is that usually subnational governments are like these silos, and the competition between different departments is not as strong as you can observe that at the national level. So I would say that there is a chance that the conditions for successful policy, mission policy at the regional level is probably a bit higher than at the national level. So good chances for Lombardy to take this idea up of the mission orientation. Next one, please. Yes. And the same is true. It's not only about working across departments within a government, but for many departments, it's actually not part of their daily routines to work closely with stakeholder groups and in a kind of a co-development and co-responsibility mode. What you normally see is more something that can be called like consultation and meeting with interest groups, things like that. Of course, governments are quite used to do that, but kind of this open approach to really collectively work on certain solutions and setting up a strategy is in many governments not really a part of the daily routines, and needs to be established for successful mission policy. Next one, please. And what we also see because of these silos we are observing in many governments, it seems that, depending on the situation we're looking at, but it seems that it might be worthwhile to think about setting up new arrangements of coordination and governance in order to take care of these mission policies. Now, the possibilities are manifold. It really depends on the political system and the administrative culture, of course, what is feasible. You could either be more hierarchical in a certain sense, kind of concentrating the responsibility of mission implementation at the head of the government. That would be a possibility, or you take it out of the established ministries and establish a kind of a new agency or a governmental body that is really specifically in charge of a certain mission. And of course, there are variants of these possibilities, but it seems that this might be something to take into consideration. Okay. Oh yeah, and kind of a key part of all this is that missions do not come for free, because of all these additional coordination necessities related to mission policy. These mission owners have to have sufficient capacities and capabilities to do all these things. Okay, back to you, Doug.
Back to me. So challenge 3, reflexivity and learning. And I had in real time, because for really trying to achieve missions and to understand the contribution that mission-oriented policies and the activities of which they support, you really need to have some indication of where they're going and how well they're running. And so reflexivity and learning in real time. So while clear and binding mission goals need to be established at the beginning of any mission policy, a system for monitoring and assessment needs to be set up early on. Given the dynamic development of a mission, and also in view of changing conditions, new perspectives and perhaps revised goals will be needed. So missions need to be able to be flexible, to flexibly respond to such changes. So we need to incorporate reflexivity and understanding of how things are rolling in real time. So a key feature is to ensure reflexivity and learning over the course of mission implementation. So formative approaches seem very useful in this regard. So I'm going to give an example, only at the tip of the iceberg yet again. I have extra slides if you want to dig deeper. So this is a French national mission-oriented research and innovation program. It's called Cultiver et protéger autrement. So that means cultivating and protecting crops in another way. So research and innovation, so the mission is research and innovation for a zero pesticide agricultural system by 2050. So it's, I'll walk you through the origins of this, but you see it's different parts of different ministries are involved and a number of funding agencies and research agencies involved in this program. So it started with a cross-ministry initiative. So here we have the Ministry of Education, Higher Education, Research and Innovation, the Ministry of Agriculture and Food, and the Ministry of Transitions, well, ecological transitions and solidarity. So the government confirms its ambition to reduce plant protection products by half by 2025 and to phase out glyphosate, for a majority of uses by the end of 2050. Now this led to the initiation of a program called EcoFito 2. But there's a history. EcoFito 1 from 2008 aimed at a 50% reduction in pesticide use by 2018, and it failed spectacularly. it led to an increase in pesticide use. I mean, it didn't lead to it. I mean, effectively, there was an increase in pesticide use. So the question was, what was the efficacy of this policy? So looking back, lessons learned from the development of the policy and implementation of the policy, it was clear, and there was clear recognition that the achievement of this goal of 50% reduction in pesticide use by 2018, depended on systemic transformations in the agricultural production system itself. And so the whole initiative was, well, cross-ministry initiative was, can we create a mission-oriented approach focusing on transformation of the agricultural system? And I chose this example with a view to the region of Lombardy, which has, of course, a strong focus on agriculture and agricultural transformation. So to cut to the chase, 10 projects were funded. So these are projects, research and innovation projects, which are run for 6 years, developing solutions, different types of solutions, very early stage solutions to reducing pesticides. So this is from dealing with seeds and seed management to sensors, to sense pests, so rather than use pesticides, anticipate on pests arriving using different types of sensors, and also other things like thinking about the whole ecosystem around the different plants and which factors are at play and how you can mobilize that to reduce pesticides. Okay, that's the research and innovation part. But the key part, the key interest for me about this project, this program, which is about, let's add it up, 20 million, 30 million euros. It's an example of one of the projects they do, programs they do. So it's the approach to steering the program and the projects through a reflexivity and strategy articulation support system. Now that's a mouthful, but I'll explain what that means. So the program includes a portfolio of activities support reflexivity, and that's the understanding of the processes of research and innovation and the choices made by all involved. The strategy articulation in real time, the anticipation of what will be the outcomes, potential outcomes of your choices and of the projects, the program itself, to bring it back to the present and articulate strategies. So I'll walk you through this diagram on the right-hand side, which is the support system, the steering support system I mentioned. So at the top, we have a steering committee, which is the connection with the ministries themselves. It's a high-level meeting group which regularly discusses whether the mission that's already been identified is the right mission. Remember, we said about thinking about mission goals themselves. So every year, or a little bit less, every half year, it is planned that this group will meet to discuss the actual fundamentals of the mission itself. Then there is the program level management. And at that, you have coordination with similar international programs. So there's a committee of international research, coordination with national and public, private, and other organizations. So this is the ecosystem, the French ecosystem around agriculture and food production, including the whole value chain, so from farm to fork. And then, of course, there's the program management itself. So there's an animation team by a program direction committee for 6 years, which regularly meets and integrate all these different elements from the ministerial steering group with the different international and national insights. So that reflects on the program. There are also other elements: reflexivity, capacity building, and production of strategic intelligence. So in this program, there is a anticipatory impact assessment approach. What that means is, and I have extra slides if we have time later to go through it, what it means is they've incorporated in the program management itself, in the steering group itself, and also in each individual project, the attempt to build capacity to anticipate on the innovation journey of the research projects undertaken, reflect on the impacts that will be generated, and develop indicators to understand whether they are performing well and contributing to the mission. So this is building capacity within the projects and programs themselves. Publications and events, of course, this is a standard approach, but in this sense, it's used to create a dialogue between the different stakeholders in the ecosystem, but also to learn, to bring it back into the steering group itself. Communication is another element of this. The only reason it's disentangled is because of the methods they use to do it. And then there's Perspective 2050. So this is a foresight exercise led by foresight professionals to build scenarios of what mission success would be. And that deals with and interacts with many different stakeholders to build up these futures, alternative futures, and to think, well, if we backcast from those futures to the present, what are the decisions that have to be made? What are the support structures and potential interventions at the policy level that are needed to enable the innovation journeys coming from this research program? So the reason I'm sharing you this is how a mission requires or could benefit from steering through reflexivity and learning. So Ralf, I'll hand over to you. Challenge 4.
Great. Yes. Now, some of the things that have already been said will kind of pop up here again, but this legitimacy issue is we thought this is so important. We need to put a special emphasis on it, because one of the reasons why we think that looking at acceptance and legitimacy in terms of mission policy is so important, because an ambitious mission effectively intervenes into the very fabric of society. It affects behavior. It will contribute to the transformation of practices and institutions. So this is definitely something that will create winners and losers, and in a sense, it is a very political issue. Actually, it will generate controversy once it becomes clear what the mission will do and how it will approach the problems that will be addressed. So at least in democratically constituted societies, thinking about legitimacy of a mission-oriented policy is really key. And in many ways, we would argue this special emphasis on legitimacy and the politicization of mission of a certain policy is not very familiar to policymakers in the field of science, technology, and innovation policy, because compared to other policy areas, at least, controversies normally do not become as heated as, for instance, in social or pension policy, just to give an example here. So just to make the point, legitimacy is important to think about how can we ensure high levels of support and acceptance in these policies. Maybe the next one. Doug already outlined brilliantly how important these strategic processes are, and it should also be clear when you go into these processes, they will be political, and they will be a very complex political negotiation process, and this is something a mission owner should be prepared to actually get involved in. Next one, please. Then, of course, this serious involvement of the relevant stakeholders that has been mentioned a number of times in this presentation today. But this is also a key element in actually ensuring higher levels of commitment of these actor groups, and to mobilize these actor groups. Otherwise, you will run into situations if you don't involve them in an appropriate way, that they will say, "Well, I'm not part of this. This is not invented here," and as it is such an essential element of mission policy to build on the mobilization of different groups in society, this is a key thing to keep in mind. Next one, please. Yes, and also it seems to be very important to invest some thinking into how can we develop an attractive mission narrative. What is convincing and what is attractive as part of mobilizing support for a mission. Next one, please. And kind of a very important supporting element of all this is also to invest some thinking into your public communication activities that support and accompany mission policies. It is very important to send out clear and credible signals about what you're planning to do. Just one example from the Netherlands, which we thought was quite interesting. The government there was very clear in communicating to industry that they are planning a certain mission and to decarbonize a certain sector. And so the industry there basically had a choice: either we will get involved and try to work together with the government, or we will be out and they will just decide without us. So this communication part is also seems to be a key thing in developing successful mission policies. Okay, I think that was the list of yeah. Okay, so back to you, I guess, Doug.
Yeah. So this is Ralf and Douglas's idea of some of the challenges, 4 key challenges for mission-oriented innovation policy. For sure, there are more. And but you can see from the way we've been describing, these are all interlinked, and there are certain themes that come out from the crisscrossing of these four challenges. And so what we'd like to do in this last slide is to give some main takeaways and food for thought. So the food for thought on missions with a regional perspective. And so, okay, so let's walk through them. So first, defining regional missions has a proximity advantage. So for the regions, local stakeholders are easier to identify, and there are historical relationships from previous interactions. And problems are better understood because of the local nature. Co-creating missions, so defining desirable directions of research and innovation with a large range of stakeholders, we think is crucial for mission success. Now, so the degree of which co-creation takes place, co-definition and co-designing of missions is the question, but it depends on the different context and the culture of that region or nation. So acknowledgement that mission-oriented innovation policy is demanding from ministries, is demanding, and other public agencies. And in order to meet these challenges, the way policy making is conducted needs to be changed. Now, SDI policy is an integral part of achieving missions, but other policy areas will also play a large role. So close collaboration with other policy areas is essential. Now, regions may have an advantage, as we've said, in this respect. Ralf, I'm going to flick. You take over for the last ones.
Yeah, happy to do so.
Here we go.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we already mentioned the issues of capacities and capabilities on the side of the mission owners, and we can just put additional emphasis on this, how important that is. We've seen in other cases where, like, where a ministerial department was or unit was supposed to implement 12 different missions, and they had a person power of two people there, and were responsible for 12 organizing and coordinating 12 missions. No way that can fly. So you do have to invest and think about what capacities and capabilities do you need to get this done. And yes, and I think this is also another key point that needs to be stressed. You to accompany such a mission policy, you have to also establish key performance indicators or some kind of monitoring system, just to really ensure that you are on track and that enables you to correct the way things are moving ahead in order to ensure mission success. And yes, this is also part of kind of the governments and the organizational parts of these mission policies. Make sure that there's a constant flow of information from the ground, what is happening in the missions, and that is fed back into the actual steering activities and the management of these missions. And I think that's the last one, right? Yes, that's one of the points I think we haven't explicitly talked about yet, but this is another observation also from a number of real mission cases out there. It is quite easy to establish a lot of expectation with your missions, like stating that a certain industry will be carbon free within a certain time frame. And it is also right to be bold, but at the same time, watch out not to promise too much, because this can, of course, cause backlash and cause a lot of frustration on the side of the actors involved and of the general public, of course, if these promises are not being held.
Okay, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you both, Ralf and Douglas, for this introduction, this comprehensive introduction to the concept and approach of the missions. Really, really interesting. I don't know if there are questions from the public. I kindly remind you that we are both on web streaming on Open Innovation platform, but there are also attendees and participants in our Zoom room. This event is promoted and organized by Lombardy region in collaboration with Bassetti Foundation, which also coordinated the scientific and operational activities of the forum during these 3 years. I see in the chat some flag. We don't have from YouTube, because also we have the web streaming through our YouTube channel, Bassetti Foundation channel. I don't know if there are some questions, comments, or requests for clarifications from our attendees in the Zoom room. Perhaps in the meantime, I have just 2 hands. I don't know who was the first, David Winnicott for Luis Mayo.
Luis, go ahead.
So who is the first?
Luis,
go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead. First of all, thank you for this this nice schematic account of missions and some putting forth a kind of normative or prescriptive viewpoint on what will make missions successful. I have a couple of
Oh no, we missed the question. David, come back.
He was frozen.
He's frozen.
Yeah, David is frozen. Perhaps, Luis, we can go ahead with you in the meantime, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I have the first thing I'd like to say is that this is a very good systematic approach to mission-oriented policies, so innovation policies. So I think it's very good to have ideas organized like this. So thanks for that. But I have basically 2 things. One of them you I think approached it at some point, which is for politicians. One of the very attractive points on mission-oriented policies is that they are very easier to communicate to the public. So the public sees what this is for. And my first question is that, since you said, and I completely agree, that it's essential that the mission is very well formulated, how much this can hinder the good formulation of a mission? That's one question. The second question is about science and technology policies. So we are used to technology development policies, and let me make almost a cartoonish mission and say the mission is organizing a happy wedding. So you worry about a number of things, the dressing of the cake, the plates, how they are in the table, what forks people use, the flowers they want to see, etc. And there is the cake. And of course, if the cake fails, the wedding fails because you say, oh, it felt very nice, but the cake was not good. But on the other hand, the development of a very good cake could be related to the need of the other mission, making cake available to everybody so that you can buy it in the supermarket. And so how do you articulate this cake development? My question is, shouldn't you have cross-cutting, so that would cut across the missions, and well-articulated technology development policies? That was my question.
This is interesting. I mean, the second point, particularly for me, in terms of technology policies, technology strategies, particularly when you're looking at enabling technologies, is, well, okay, you can see that they fit and may contribute to many different missions. So what about that sort of coordination? Rather than mission-centric, we're looking at technology-centric, but through across the whole of the different missions. So I don't have an answer to that. I don't see, from my study of mission-oriented policies around the globe, much in that area. Do you, Ralf?
No, but the point is well made, because indeed that is an issue we did run into when we were looking at the 12 German missions. Because studying them a bit closer, some of the missions actually could potentially have some, how should I put it, some contradictions and some tensions between them, because what one mission wants to achieve is actually at the detriment of the other, and vice versa. But then there are, of course, also the more positive possibilities, like that one mission success actually also supports a neighboring mission, for instance, and that they kind of support each other, which would be a wonderful complementary approach. So what we did see as a need is a kind of a meta governance for mission policy. Once you are actually in the process of implementing a whole range of missions, that is definitely something to take into account and think about how could that work within your specific context, within your specific political system. I think it's going to be difficult to find a one-size-fits-all approach to that, but the message would be, if you are working or implementing a number of missions, also think about how they work together and what the possible frictions are between these, and maybe also the complementaries. But maybe just also in terms of the other question you posed in terms of mission formulation. Indeed, that's a good point. I think that is a positive thing, that it is comparatively easy to communicate what you can do with a mission. But we also observe that some policymakers do shy away of becoming very concrete. I mean, a very general goal is easily formulated, but being specific and saying, well, we will achieve a number X, Y, Z in the year, I don't know, 2032. There is, of course, the risk of not achieving the mission, and then what will that mean in terms of the public debate that will spur? So there is a risk on the side of the policymakers to actually go down that road. That's definitely something to keep in mind. Yeah.
If I may add, these are certainly 2 extra slides for our presentation, Ralf, next time we give it, because this kind of resonance between different missions, let's call it that way, because there does need to be some kind of management, because some missions will not be pursued, and you have to have a reason why they are not being pursued. But also this whole idea of technocentric and how it connects the portfolio of missions. I think that's a slide that we need to develop, Ralf, in our talk, and back it up.
Thanks a lot. Perhaps David Winikoff is again with us, and I don't know if David.
Sorry, and I missed the last question and got kicked out of the Zoom. So let me pose the question now again. Maybe better formulated after a few minutes. The question is really relating to the relationship between early stage technology policy, emerging technology policy, and missions. And you draw a distinction between accelerator type versus transformative types. You have a continuum of kind of where there should be political involvement or where there's governance challenges. I help direct the secretariat of a working party at the OECD on emerging technology. And we're trying to figure out the impact and implications of missions for some of the policies that we're developing. In fact, this is one of the themes of a conference coming up in December. And so it seems like the implication was you don't see necessarily a role for missions style policy intervention in the early stages of technology. Whereas I might say, well, that's precisely the stage of technology where it's possible to shape the directions of research and shape emerging technology. But I wondered if you could or might reflect on that question.
I have a response, Ralf.
Go ahead, please.
Shall I start? No, I agree with you, David. Of course, we exchange on this. I mean, in the background of the example I gave from the zero pesticides, that is early stage research anticipating on transformative change, system change. And the presentation of the accelerators and transformer type is a diagnosis of what we see today in terms of mission-oriented policies. So this is the kind of typology that we're seeing. But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Ralf, but there are other elements emerging, and we are part of it. I think the key issue, and it's an element, I think, a discussion that you missed, David, from Luis's point when you said, well, okay, emerging technologies connect with many different missions. So how do you kind of look at mission-oriented policy and coordination and consultation with emerging technology policy? That's a key issue. And we didn't have an answer for Luis, but my answer to you, David, is yes, there needs to be this anticipatory governance, certainly, but the focus should be really on, well, it depends where you stand. If you stand on at the management of research and innovation programs for early stage technologies, you build capacities in those programs and at the project level to bring the governance in there. At a higher level, there are different types of capacities for developing those policies. And this is the issue between that Luis brought up about STI policy that looks at new and emerging tech, and STI policy that's looking at missions. How do you really connect those dots? So not really an answer, but just echoing your point. Ralf, do you want to jump in?
It's not. I haven't thought it through yet because it's a really important question David is posing here. Part of the answer would probably be is that we are probably looking at a kind of a system of nested governance levels here. You have this governance of the mission itself, but nonetheless things within, for instance, research processes, research performing organizations, they still have their own governance approaches in place, and ideally they would have like some anticipatory capabilities involved there as well, as Doug just mentioned. So this does not exclude, one doesn't exclude the other. Another way of thinking of it is that particularly these accelerator missions we were talking about, there you basically see very like empirically you can see different missions. Sometimes the mission already knows which technology or technological solution we want to pursue. That decision has already made. If it is right or not is another question, but for the mission itself, this decision has been made, and the aim of the mission is then to bring it into application, for instance, and to overcome certain barriers. But there are also missions that are actually looking at things from the other side and say, well, we have a certain problem, but we don't know yet how to solve it. What would be the right technological solution to that? And then the whole mission design becomes a very different form. So, and yeah.
Yeah, if I may add, because when we were preparing this talk, Ralf and I had some slides that we took out and left, some that we left in, and some that we took out kind of addressed this point about, the nested governance. But of course, one point that we put in our presentation was about the flexibility of the whole emission-oriented policy and its implementation. So behind that is the coordination and consultation between those different nested layers of governance. How do you do that and facilitate that to have flexibility around emissions, which may be modified as you move on, and they have to be modified legitimately? So how do you do this? And so this is really the elephant in the room we're not talking about, we're ignoring, is about the coordination between all these different layers of governance. Because if missions are going to work, that's needed too.
Thank you a lot. Any other comments or questions from the public, from the attendees in the Zoom room? I have a question from you, just to have a very brief and very rough recap of this new formulation of the mission. The concept is no new, but in this new formulation, also thanks to the idea and the formulation of Mariana Mazzucato, there are new elements. We have the focus more on grand and societal challenges instead of technological challenges. We have to rethink and reshape the governance structure, especially if we are talking about transformative missions. The more we are bolder, the more we are transformative, the more we need to rethink the governance in terms of procedures, in terms of departments, in structure, in the policy making, and the idea of legitimacy and buy-in of all the stakeholders involved, so whoever has a stake in the mission. But I think, and you have mentioned a lot, this idea of involving stakeholders at large level. This is my personal interest, as you know, Ralf and Douglas. The main novelty on this new formulation of the missions is the involvement of citizens in all the stages of the mission. So starting from the design part, so in setting the agenda of the mission and the mission projects, so working with the citizens in defining what are the general idea of the missions and the missions projects grounding in the local and territorial level, working with them in co-creating possible solutions, responses to the technological and social parts of the missions, but also involving them in the co-evaluation and co-assessing, creating together indicators to really assess the success of this mission. I think this is a relevant point, and we have experience, tested methods and approaches, especially for the co-design and for the co-creation. We have a lot of examples coming from deliberative democracy, for instance, and technology assessment for the co-design. We have a lot of initiatives in co-creation, working in the realm of social innovation, but also in producing and co-creating technological innovation products, services, and we have more. We have less elements, less experience in co-evaluation. So it's experimental also in this, the approach, the new approach of the mission. So I would like to know a little bit more from you about this, about the involvement of citizens and the role in the mission, because I think it's really key.
Angela, you go straight for the throat. Look at all these things. No, I agree totally. I mean, I have some comments. Ralf, do you want to jump in? I have a few.
I mean, I might just disappoint you a little bit, Angela. I mean, normatively, I fully agree. I think this is important, and I try to also argue that it is absolutely important to do these participatory exercises enterprises involving people that eventually will be affected by the mission policies, because otherwise you will run into a number of problems. However, it kind of also depends on the mission. There are some missions where where I'm not sure if it really makes sense to involve citizens. It's much more important to involve the stakeholders. And just one example, there are missions out there trying to decarbonize the cement industry. And this is quite a technical thing, and needs to change, kind of the whole production process and a number of things in this complicated matter. But the role of citizens will be rather narrow compared to other missions, where in my view, the intensive involvement of citizens is absolutely necessary. So I think it really depends on what type of objective we're looking at. Just another point on that. I know this is probably terribly boring to most of you, but I think it's not important nonetheless. In the German case, there were a number of participatory fora involved in the implementation of these 12 missions I mentioned previously. Really excellent stuff. They were called regional dialogues, where you went into different German regions and had dialogues with a broad set of stakeholders and citizens and lay people discussing certain issues like changes in the mobility system and what have you not. The problem there was these activities were more or less detached of the actual policymaking processes on the side of the department in charge. So we had great activities going on, but the linkage to the actually policymaking processes was not there, and actually. It is not easy to establish an effective linkage because the way most departments operate, this is not foreseen. This is not part of their modus operandi, and this links back to the capabilities and capacities where we were mentioning a couple of times that governments need to think about how can we actually accomplish this? How do we integrate these citizen views into our daily workings? And that's not easy.
Yeah, the absorptive capacity is key. And, I'll try to be more hopeful, Angela, in my response, is that unusually so, is I can disentangle what you're saying into four kind of elements around missions. One is about mission definition and the type of role that citizens engage in defining the missions. We see experiments, maybe not so successful, maybe it will improve, but on deciding what the mission should be, and what policies should be pursued. The other one is about mission implementation, actually doing the missions, actually delivering the knowledge creation and invention. And you can see all sorts of opportunities there. And depending on which mission, as Ralf said, there'll be a different degree of involvement. But, on taking the European 5 missions, citizens in cancer would translate more into patients' involvement. So the role of citizens would be more specific. In smart, climate neutral and smart cities, you can see multiple roles for citizens in the production of new knowledge, as we've seen in lots of co-creation activities, and also in co-invention of certain things. And so in terms of implementation, you can see a lot already that can be drawn. The question is to link it into this mission idea. The mission evaluation, so evaluation of the policy and evaluation of actually the implementation, those are two slightly different things. And I would say that evaluating the policy would be mission appraisal, and that in terms of parliamentary TA and these kind of things, there's an opportunity for parliamentary technology assessment to really look at appraising these policies and these implementation activities to see, at a distance, whether they what citizens think and how supportive they are and what they should be. And in terms of evaluation, this is the key thing, isn't it? How can you in real time evaluate mission implementation and have citizens involved in that? Because if we're serious about co-creation within these missions and citizens are involved, they should have a say in what criteria of success are embedded in that co-creation activity. So usually we see firms taking the lead with citizens at the early stages and then somehow being separated from certain co-creation activities. What would be interesting would be to integrate in the co-creation activity, so down on the ground, mission implementation, co-development of performance indicators. What would be a successful outcome of those co-creation activities? So that's very, very micro level stuff, but you can imagine that that can percolate up. And so it depends on all these different connections between this nested governance. So there's a lot of opportunity for researchers like me to dig into those details and play with different projects.
Thanks a lot, both. Yes, definitely to have a solid, robust and meaningful citizen engagement process, you need to connect to the policy-making part. Otherwise, it's just for the sake of public engagement. You need to have results that are actionable for the policy-making. Otherwise, of course, this can be a problem also in terms of trust and in the relationship between society, institutions, and all the stakeholders involved in such processes. So I don't know if there are any other questions. I saw a question from David Winikoff in the chat. I don't know if Ralf and Douglas would like to briefly comment on for the public. I can read the comment by David Winikoff. A point that doesn't come up. You see the possible diminution of the importance of STI policy in the missions context, but I would rather say it requires a shift in how we imagine the capacity of STI to engage with other policy areas. We need ministry actors to engage STI policy and stakeholders and vice versa. The relative strength of role also will depend on the mission and also on the stage of technology.
Very well put, very well put. I would agree. Good point. But maybe just a comment on that. Indeed, this is an issue that I think is going to be might be difficult for some mission owners out there. As I think I said previously, in most cases we are observing missions are at the moment brought forward by ministries in charge of science, technology, innovation policy. Depending on the country, of course, sometimes it's the research ministry, sometimes it's the ministry for the economy. Whatever it is, the relative role of science and technology and innovation, at least in the more ambitious missions that have a transformative element in them, will be relative and will be relatively shrinking, I would suppose, and other sectoral policies will become more important. But I think this is not a message of despair. I think this is something because if I put my hat on and I were a member of a ministry of research, for instance, I could well argue that while STI policy is maybe not the key in this mission, but without certain scientific solutions and technological elements in this, the mission won't fly either. So this is, I think they have good reasons to argue that involving science, technology, and innovation is absolutely essential. Even though alone they won't be able to reach the mission goals, but without them, it's going to be equally difficult. Yeah.
I think also for me it depends on where you're standing. I mean, I'm quite ambidextrous because I work down at the floor where new knowledge is being produced and innovations have been created, and also I look at policies to shape this. If you look at on the floor where the new knowledge has been produced and innovation has been created, then it's about timing, isn't it? At early stages, different ministries have different roles, and at later stages in that innovation journey or that transformation path that innovation may create. And so, I mean, take the zero pesticides. We see the Ministry of Education and Research working with the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Transition, Sustainable Transition in short. But then, as we progress, and it's part of the anticipation in that program, if we really consider that new approaches to reduce pesticides will be implemented, you certainly will see destabilization issues as the system is being transformed and other ministries at play. to enable that mission to succeed, you'll have the Ministry of Employment, you have all sorts of the Ministry of Finance, you have different forms of regulation coming in. So again, if you're standing at the point of the innovation journey, let's call it that, at early stages, certain ministries will be more prevalent than others, but certainly they have to be involved in the anticipation, because the whole idea is to start now and to achieve a mission there in the future, where these different ministries need to somehow create joined up policy that will last. And one key issue that we do not discuss is the policy cycle. And these missions are usually about 20 to 30 years long. So how do we create not only present connections between different ministries, different policy areas, but also some continuation through these different natural rhythms of a turnaround in the ministries?
Thank you. Talking about journeys, in our journey of the webinar series in dialogue with the Regional Forum for Research and Innovation, the frequent travelers know that this is the occasion also to present a little bit the activities of the forum in these 3 last years. And at the very start of the pandemic, the Lombardia region was the first region in Europe struck by the contagions and the outbreak of COVID-19. And the forum was ready and proactive in providing to the regional government a set of flash recommendations to cope with the emergency, but also thinking about the recovery phase. Of course, focusing on its role on suggesting activities and action for the responsible governance of research and innovation that, of course, were and are still key for coping with the pandemics and the recovery phase. So I asked to Ralf and Douglas to tell us a little bit about this recommendation and what were the main ideas behind this fresh recommendation for the Lombardy regional government.
Yeah. Should I start, Doug?
Yeah, go for it.
Just a few thoughts. Indeed, I mean, of course, this was a dramatic situation for all of us, but particularly, of course, for northern Italy, and of course, the forum has members from the region itself, but also a number of people outside the region, and we were actually very concerned about the situation, and we're actually hoping that this flash recommendation would be some kind of support to the regional actors. I think that the key issue in such a situation is that you have this element of urgency that was really troubling all of us, and you have to make decisions under extreme pressure on the one side, and at the same time you don't have the sufficient information. You have to decide under uncertainty. And so what we try to do, correct me, Doug, if I'm wrong, but we try to provide a little bit of guidance in terms of how to approach a governance situation like that. And for instance, despite all this dramatic situation, really try your best to be transparent about your decision making, be transparent about the information sources you're using. I think these are important elements we try to involve here and kind of provide some advice to the decision makers in the region. Doug?
Yeah, I mean, remember the time in Paris, we weren't too far behind Lombardy in this crisis. We were at the forum, many of us have children, we were working through the night, and Angela's nodding there. She's one with children, young children as well. And we came together to try to see, well, okay, how can responsible approaches to research and innovation, our experiences from the forum, how can we mobilize that to identify areas of concern and areas of opportunity where some of our insights could really inform the region during this panic time of the early stages of pandemic. So what we did was, you know, we have a number of members, there are 10 of us in the forum, some from Italy, itself, from the region itself, and some from around the world, like Ralf and myself, Dave Gaston there. And so we shared our experiences, what we're seeing, and just put our heads together to see, well, what are the elements to consider during this time of crisis? And so I've got the recommendations open here, so I can give you a few tasters of the sort of things we talked about. So one was about citizen-led initiatives. We saw at the early stages when there was shortages in some of the protective material around, face masks, and also remember the ventilators as well. We saw that there were initiatives, bottom-up initiatives, to create and share these things, facilitated by new technologies, which Louis should be knowledgeable about, from additive manufacturing and 3D printing, which enabled the production, a distributed production of some of these things, which we thought was fascinating. And it showed the role of citizen-led or stakeholder-led, whatever you want to call it, but community-led initiatives to create solutions or try to work together. And so one of our recommendations was how to really leverage and work with citizen-led initiatives. I mean, one recommendation was work with these initiatives during these times, because there is a lot of knowledge distributed that you can mobilize already. And so that was just one flavor. Another one was about incorporation and building trust. Remember, at those early stages, very little was known. A lot of decisions were being made. And so we gave some advice on how to maintain trust with the citizens through our policies and different measures. So we mobilized different insights from our experience from responsible research and innovation to inform how you could create and maintain that trust, and what are the potential pitfalls that may be coming up. So Angela, those are just some of the ideas that came from the forum.
Thanks a lot for this brief recap and presentation of the flash recommendations. And thanks a lot. We are running out of the time, so I think it's time to close up this meeting. Of course, first, I would like to thank a lot Ralf Lindner and Douglas Robinson for their joint presentation on mission policies. We know that this is a key feature, a key word also for the policies across the Europe, but also beyond the limits of Europe, and I think can be very inspiring for the regional policymakers and regional stakeholders in drafting their own mission-oriented approaches for the local territory. Thanks a lot to all the attendees and the participants in this meeting. Thank you very much. I wish you a lovely continuation of the day.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great to see you.